So our speaker today is Holly Harris, and she has over 10 years of experience as a tech recruiter. She's involved in a bunch of different employee resource groups within Visa and is committed to encouraging more women to enter tech careers and ensuring that Visa's work environment and leadership is diverse and inclusive. And they'll chat a little bit more about that after the presentation. But for now, I'd love to hand it over to Holly, who's going to be leading today's presentation on how to address and recover from employment gaps.
Thank you, Amanda. Appreciate the introduction. And thank you all for making time to join us this afternoon. I hope you're all feeling healthy, safe, and mentally well. I know those are tall orders for 2020 at this point. As Amanda mentioned, I'm Holly Harris. I'm a professional technology recruiter currently practicing my craft everywhere you want to be, or, Visa. I do have 10 years of experience in tech recruiting with an even split of agency and corporate experience. At Visa, I recruit for cybersecurity and operations and infrastructure technology teams. And honestly, part of my job is looking for reasons to say no to a candidate's resume, because time is money and I have to protect my client's time, ensuring that they only spend that precious resource on worthwhile candidates and resumes. But I have good news. You do have the power to influence and guide me to a yes and subsequently an interview. I comb through thousands and thousands of resumes a year, and some of them stand out for better or worse. And you may be inclined to think that a gap on your resume or your CV is for the worse, but not necessarily. It's how you elect to communicate that gap that can make all the difference in the world. It can be the difference between a recruiter like me picking up the phone and calling to understand more about your experience, or rejecting your resume altogether. You can take control of the gap in your work history and what it conveys about you. That's actually one of the definitions of recovery. It's the action or process of regaining possession or control of something. If you have a gap in your work history, you get to control what it says about you. The focus of today's topic and discussion is recovering your resume's gaps, which for a lot of people are sources of anxiety, nervousness, and even shame. And at the end of today's session, I hope you'll feel proud of who you are, what got you here, and leave this discussion aware that you can craft any experience into a positive one if you're willing to be open, thoughtful, and communicative. Common gaps in resumes are the result of stepping away from the workforce to bear or adopt and raise children. Other gaps are due to changing your focus on aging parents whose care demands part or full-time. While other gaps may be due to returning to complete a higher degree, live abroad with a military spouse. And for you, COVID-19 might be actively carving out a gap in your resume. So your full-time job is now getting another full-time job. Did you start your own business? Or did you, your company that ultimately didn't take off, did you take a professional sabbatical or a personal hiatus because you needed a break? These are gaps that can range from a few weeks or months, even up to years and decades. And the weeks don't need explaining, but more than a few months and years do, especially if the gaps occur outside economic downturns, such as the one that we find ourselves in. If you take away nothing else from me today, I do want you to believe that there's great honor in having a gap on your resume for reasons like these. And if you work it right, I, the recruiter with lenses sharpened to weed out the riffraff, unmitigatable risks, and BS, will actually see your gap for what it is, a compliment or continuation of your respectable career evolution. For example, you, a software engineer or a project manager, you decide to follow your spouse to fulfill their dream of serving with Doctors Without Borders. And you live abroad for a year where you didn't actually hold any software engineering or project manager title, or even any employment that shows up on a W-2. But what did you do there? Did you get involved in your new community to learn the culture, a little bit of the language, or help automate a process for the new well the village was building? Did you teach English or Python to 8th graders part-time while you were learning a new household skill? Did you help direct a play at your church or create an access database to the library? Include those things in your resume and be specific about what you did in terms of how it translates to a business like mine for the lead software engineer or program manager job that you're seeking back here in corporate America. These incredible experiences and contributions can be worded to convey applicability and relevancy to your professional expertise. You didn't step away from your career, not fully anyway. You applied your skill set to a new role. And it doesn't matter that you didn't clear that 6 or 5-figure salary that you normally would. You still worked, and for incredibly noble causes. Now, there are certainly less altruistic reasons for having a gap on your resume, such as rehab or incarceration, for example. And while that time away from your career is not something you want to draw a lot of attention to, you must still address the gap on paper. The most conservative way to do this is to list a personal sabbatical and include the dates in the same format you would normally for standard employment stint. Candidates with these experiences in particular, or particularly incarceration in the past, must sometimes be more strategic about where they apply. Please also know that these are not experiences that automatically exclude you from re-entering the workforce. As we've now established, life gives us exchangeable experience. People tend to dismiss or play down their own experiences outside of whatever professional role they have. But please remember that exchangeable experience is an opportunity to show your character as well as skills. Now, please forgive me as I'm going to actually read this slide to you. And later, I hope that you can reflect on your own life experiences and how they can be communicated to convey exchangeable experience. So you think only, okay, I virtually tutored a group of 6 or 7 8th grade girls in my daughter's class that morphed into this after-school coding camp. But what my hiring manager could see, what I could see too, is your ability to custom design and execute a scalable program that fills a gap, elevates and empowers others, that fosters diversity and inclusion in the STEM field while actually honing your coding and code reviewing skills. This is the job scope essentially of a potential lead software engineer if you write it up accurately in the experience section of your resume. This is a resume. Let's see, we've got it here. The next slide, Mel. The excerpt. Do we see the next? Sorry, I'm having a delay on my side. That's a go. Resume excerpt. Thank you. This is a resume sample excerpt I crafted, drawn from the previous slide scenario. So I want to go through it together a little bit. So as you would for an employer and job title, you give name to where and what you did. In this case, middle school community coding camp founder and instructor. You want to list out the time period that you operated in this capacity. In this scenario, it's fall to spring semester and late summer to fall semester the following school year. You'll notice that the phrasing and word choice is very intentional. You want to use action words to guide the reader or scanner, as the case is often for likes of me. You want us to see what you need us to see. But you do need to be willing to be a little vulnerable with someone like me on the phone. Was your resume gap due to you stepping away from your own career to manage your parents' care plan and hospice, where you also got to spend those last precious weeks with them? Though not in significant detail on your resume, share that with your recruiter. In learning this, I very quickly come to believe that you are selfless, resilient, adaptive, that you work productively and collaboratively with a variety of people in highly emotionally charged situations, And those are attributes and skill sets that my hiring managers and I desperately want on our teams. I can now better advocate for you. Was the resume gap created when you took some time off to avoid burnout after putting in 60-hour work weeks at a startup company that lacked in leadership? In learning this, I come to believe that you are self-aware, you're accommodating to yourself and others, and you recognize limitations as well as resources. You may also have some flexibility, which puts you in a more powerful negotiating place. And this helps me understand more about your personality and what type of worker you are. I can also touch on my company's benefits that you might need to seriously consider when you're making an offer decision. And if you did keep those Java skills as sharp as possible while you were doing something other than being a full-time software engineer, list those lynda.com classes you took or those hackathons that you participated in, because we're going to test you on those skills later, but fill your gap with meaningful content that make me want to get you into that code pairing interview. Now, research reveals that women in particular will not apply for a job if she doesn't meet 100% of the job requirements. And we're very critical about our own qualifications for a position. There's a few bullet points here from an essential functions of a project analyst role. This is actually this is actually commonly found at Visa. Now, I'm not going to read all of this to you, but at a high level, it's asking for working closely with cross-functional groups, bringing a customer-focused mindset with the ability to multitask, assisting with management, project scope, and change control, and then comfortability leading discussions and communicating regularly. When you're reading a job description you're interested in, before you write it off altogether because you think you're missing a few bullet points or your experience isn't recent, I urge you to mentally step back before clicking away and really think about your experiences holistically. Because many things that we do in life have a target start and end date with stakeholders, budgets, communication cadences, and deliverables. And naturally, you'll want your resume experience to align with the requirements of that position or the position for which you're applying. But I'd wager that when you volunteered your expertise to help automate some processes during that year you lived abroad, or you did some pro bono technical writing while you were full-time job searching, or you took a retail job. Maybe you just took that retail job to take a break before you went back to practicing law. My sister actually did that. We can totally talk about that if you want. You worked closely with cross-functional parties, product vendors, international donor orgs, construction workers, and city regulators and customers, the public, to plan, design, and deliver a solution in part or whole. And for a lot of companies, this experience can be exchangeable or translatable to their requirements, making you a strong candidate for consideration. So in conclusion, there are 3 key learnings here today. Be proud of your life experiences and honor all of it in a meaningful way. If you don't fill the resume gaps, others will do it for you. And your resume gap may make you feel vulnerable, but even that vulnerability may help me to advocate for you to translate that career pivot or break into a value adding return on investment or ROI for my company. I've compiled this brief appendix slide with links and recommendations to volunteer, connect, upskill or reskill. And I've shared this deck with Amanda so that she can share it with you as you're interested. I do encourage you, if you've got a little bit extra money, maybe upgrade your LinkedIn account to premium. That's going to give you access to lynda.com. That's now owned by LinkedIn. If you're wanting to start a free coding camp, whether in your neighborhood, your community center, even virtually, it's all virtual at this point, that link for freecodecamp.org. Online volunteerism and the volunteer match especially, which includes virtual opportunities, is really cool because you can put your skills in and tell them what your availability is, and they will match relevant opportunities to you. And then just learning new skills and networking in the community, whether the one you're in or the one you want to be in. Meetup.com, I cannot say enough about it. It's free to log on and join. And whatever your interest is, there's a meetup for you.